Okay, we're into another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. I have a really cool one for you guys. I'm actually on location, I should say, here at Belmont Watches in San Diego. They were kind enough to, while these pieces were kind of passing in the night, luckily for you guys, one of them is still available. The other just recently sold, and I had to make my way out here to kind of catch for them both together so I could share with you guys a nice, actually my first time seeing both of these together in the same room and being able to handle them both in the metal, so I can kind of compare and contrast and just really appreciate all of the different touches for the classic vintage model as well as the new reissue. Now, a little bit about Seiko, right? They were founded back in 1881. They're Japanese in origin and have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end. And in terms of type of watch, of course, these are really iconic dive watches. Some key characteristics in design when you're looking for a diver. You're going to want water resistance, stick with some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a dive extension is always nice if on bracelet. Here on the left, we have the vintage 6105 8110 Captain Willard, which was famously featured on the wrist of Martin Sheen's character Captain Willard in the seminal 1979 Francis Ford Coppola film Apocalypse Now. The inclusion of the watch was definitely no mistake. The Seiko 6105 diver was really popular amongst U.S. servicemen during the Vietnam War in the early 1970s, and it was really favored for its rugged nature and resilience to harsh jungle environments. The 6105 is one of the most celebrated vintage tool watches out there today, not only because it played a role within the Vietnam War, but also because it was so popular amongst divers of the time. You can actually get this piece for $18.50 from Belmont Watches. Yes, $18.50, and you can own a piece of history with an amazing story and a whole lot of wabi-sabi, to go along with that. Now, on the right-hand side, you're going to see the modern Prospex SLA033, which is actually a 2,500-piece limited edition Captain Willard reissue. And of course, it falls within that premium recreation line because it is, quite premium in terms of the spec of the build quality and the materials, even the choice of movement. This one actually recently sold from Belmont Watches for $33.50. These are both outstanding pieces, and I'm really looking forward to sharing them with you. With that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look.
You're never just buying a watch, you're buying the seller too. Well, here's a seller I can absolutely recommend. Belmont Watches in San Diego. Adam and Anthony are the real deal, true collectors with an enthusiast's eye. Check out their well-curated and regularly updated selection at belmontwatches.com. Follow along for weekly drops, and if you don't see something you like, reach out and connect. They might just have a lead on one of your own Grail watches. I've personally purchased both new and used from them, and even used their servicing and repair network. From new releases to vintage references and everything in between, whether niche independence or the horological holy trinity, Belmont has you covered. With competitive pricing and quick shipping, you can enjoy a friction-free experience. So before your next big purchase, make sure to check out Belmont Watches and tell them Mark sent you.
Okay, big shout out to Belmont Watches again for having me in, as well as letting me get hands-on with these two pieces. Quick customary wristwatch check. I'm wearing another 6105 inspired piece, but this is the 6105 8000, also known as the Slim Turtle, or some even call it the Slim Willard in terms of its inspirations. But this one has been quite modernized, and this definitely is a little bit more within the tool watch vein versus being here more of a premium tribute. So let's actually hold these side by side and just really, let's enjoy some of these details. If I can get the camera to focus, there you go. Cool. So we have a 44 millimeter diameter versus a 45 millimeter diameter, a 12.5 millimeter thickness versus about a 13 millimeter thickness. So not too different there. Lug to lug, 49.5 from the original versus 49.7 from the modern update. You have a domed hardlex mineral on the original, which you can see here. It's holding up really well, and it has that signature chamfer around the outer edge of the crystal, which is great. Then on the modern reissue, we're going to have the Seiko 8L35, which is going to be, you know, Grand Seiko based, but essentially less decoration, less regulation, still has a 50-hour power reserve and beats at 4 Hertz. So that's 28,800 vibrations per hour versus the original's 3 Hertz of 21,600 vibrations per hour. So a little bit more of a stutter step there. And of course, there's going to be some other modern niceties, like let's say the bezel. So the original bezel action is this really cool 60 click bidirectional ball click action, which actually even now still pretty nice. This is a vintage piece, so it's going to be a bit gritty from time to time, but it helps to push down on it, which is definitely something that is a feature of these kind of older styles. So very, very cool. Versus here, you're going to have the modern 120 click. Very smooth, very dampened, slight bit of, I wouldn't call it play, but you can kind of rock it back a little bit there, and that is one of the things that's kind of a trade-off when you want to have smoothness versus all-out kind of tactile clickiness. And sometimes that clickiness can be harsh, so it's nice to have something like this that just feels very refined, very elevated, right? Especially when you look at the finish on here and the condition. Whoever purchased this is really going to be somebody that's very lucky, because this one is in really quite immaculate condition. Now, here you're going to have a dual curve sapphire with an inner AR coating, so you can really appreciate the clarity, and of course you're going to have a nice amount of, you know, that reflection typically that could come off of a lot of these glossy surfaces, but it is nicely mitigated by that super clear AR coating. Now, the crown on the new one, although it does have that lock signature there, it's actually just a screw down crown versus the locking crown here, which is going to be something where essentially you just kind of push and twist. There's no hand winding on here, you just got to shake it, but it does have a hackable movement. I don't want to, you know, mess with this watch too much because it is so beautifully preserved and you know, really well done. You know, I don't want to get into that too much, but here for the you know, the modern version, you're going to have definitely something that's a lot more familiar: screw down crown, hacking, hand winding, and you know, all the goodies that you would expect. Now, looking at the case back, both of them do have solid case backs, and you can see one is a tribute to the other. This one is going to be more of actually like an etch, versus here it's going to be more of a stamp or an engraving, a little bit deeper, and I think looks a little bit nicer than even the modern reinterpretation. But I also understand that here with this, it's essentially going to be smooth on your wrist, so you don't have to worry about anything kind of imprinting, versus here you might, if you were to wear this, you know, for an extended period of time and you have it, you know, tightly secured to your wrist. So getting into the dial details here, they both have really nice clean indices. They're very iconic, of course, to the 6105 lineage. One is going to have applied indices and an applied logo. Here you're going to see raised indices, and it's my understanding that you know, a couple years ago Seiko really wanted to commit to that robustness for shock resistance by having everything actually stamped through for the raised indices, but to a level, of course, on their higher end pieces where you can't even tell. There's not going to be like any type of signs of that. If you guys look really closely here, it's not like you're going to see anything on the dial that would make you actually believe that. So they go the extra mile so that nothing will fall out, and that's also another reason why they forego the applied Seiko logo, because again, they are committed to making sure that these are robust tool watches, you know, of course in this case finished to an extremely high level. And of course, they're still capable of that because they're still doing applied logos on things like Presage watches, or, you know, non kind of sporty watches within their more premium lines, and even some of their less non-premium watches too, which is always fun. They both have matte black. Of course, one has a bit more of a patina to it, where you can see not only is the lume that is actually the original tritium lume there, which has picked up some patina versus the modern Seiko Lumibright, but even the texture of the dial itself has taken on a slightly grayer hue, a bit of a kind of anthracite tone there, which I think looks really, really great. Also, here you're going to have a diver's 200 meters of water resistance on the model, on the modern reinterpretation, I should say, modern reissue. So that is going to be ISO compliant versus the original. For the time, you know, this was considered, you know, water resistant at 150 meters. But still, kind of all you're ever going to need. But if you're going to be wearing this, you know, typically people aren't going to buy a vintage dive watch to get wet and you know, do heavy duty with. That's why you have models like the SPB line. This one is definitely going to be better worn, you know, as just kind of a special piece for special occasions, or, you know, honestly in your daily wear, if you kind of have that aesthetic of things that are worn and you know, that kind of vintageized style. But these look great. Also, both of them have 19 millimeter lugs, so technically you could swap the straps if you wanted to. Another modern nicety that was added was drilled lugs. So you can see the original actually didn't have drilled lugs, but now you do have those, so you can easily kind of swap these out. Although 19 millimeters isn't the easiest type of strap to swap out for, you know, they are more and more readily available here in the year of 2024. So with that said, let's actually get these on the wrist and see how they wear. Okay guys, as you can see, this original 6105 looks gorgeous. Check that out. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to get a bit of distortion and it's going to appear larger than it actually is. But if I keep my wrist a little bit lower here and then just tighten up the frame, you guys can get a more detailed look. Also seeing how nicely it sits there, guys. So although this is a relatively wide watch, again, that is part of its charm. It's kind of the whole point. And when you scale this down too small, which thankfully they haven't done, I think it would look really odd and awkward. So especially because at the end of the day, you actually do have a smaller dial section and a larger bezel. And then of course, there's a lot of body to that case, that cushion case, that extends much further there. So really, really handsome, and absolutely just pure nostalgia oozing out of this piece. Versus here, check this out. Wow. The glossiness, the deep dark colors, the flawless finish there. That is just immaculate and very, very cool. I mean, I could easily see somebody owning both of these and really just enjoying them both in, you know, very different types of situations. This looks amazing. I mean, geez, this almost makes it seem like my camera has improved quality. Like, that's how sharp this is. So it looks better than 4K when I look at this piece. And hey, you know, there's nothing wrong with the good old 1080p of the original, let's say. There's so much more texture, so much more visual interest there. It's really quite wonderful. And you guys can see, look how surprisingly slim that wears. Look at the way it just lays on the wrist, thanks to those signature Seiko undercuts and contours. Really fantastic. And of course, you can see the bezel really separates itself from the bulk of the case by having those nice tailored forms and shapes, and it just really helps break up the lines so it doesn't seem like one large glob. Here, a little bit sharper and with probably italics on a little bit, but a lot sharper, I should say. But you can also notice it still has those hallmarks of, look how flat that lays on the wrist. Like, you wouldn't expect a watch that's about 44, 45 millimeters to just lay on the wrist like that, give you so much nice range of motion in terms of comfort. And although it does have that wide stance in diameter, again, the lug to lug isn't too shabby at just, under 50 millimeters. And honestly, if it was any shorter than that, it might look a little too stout. So there's scale in terms of size, right, which is always important, but also you want to make sure that you're thinking about proportions and balance. And man, this one is awesome. So with that said, let's actually get these off and see what we can do about getting a little bit darker in here for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. All right, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. And as you can see, although we couldn't get it totally dark, that tritium loom is pretty well worn, while that Seiko Lumabrite, as you guys can see, if I just kind of darken it in, it looks really, really great still. And that's one of the nice things in terms of when the exterior eventually ages enough, you're still going to have that great functional loom, as similar to the case, right? You're going to have that hardened coating. You're going to have, of course, that steel bezel versus the aluminum, and it's lacquered, so it's going to all last better. The crystals, everything, but hey, again, you wear it out, it's still going to be very functional. But one thing I always like to do is work in a bit of a low light transition, because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. So we include a bit of harsh lighting, which typically could expose any types of production defects. But all you're going to see here is on that SLA, maybe a couple smudges from my fingertips, and then a whole lot of personality and story coming out on that vintage 6105. So, whew, what a set, what a pair of lookers. And you guys can see still ultimately legible. Nothing's really going to wash out regardless of the different angles, and it actually really helps you appreciate the finish on both of these pieces, whether it be that really well maintained and preserved working finish on the vintage model, or the modern luxury level hairline brushing there and deep Zaratsu polish. So let's go ahead and get the lights back here. Awesome. Okay guys, so closing thoughts on these. You love seeing these two next to each other, and again, I'm really happy you guys came along this episode. And yeah, you really gain a better appreciation for each piece and every choice made to either mirror or update against the original. Now is really a great time to be a Seiko collector, because you can go for that iconic look, and you still have the luxury of choosing between a modern reissue and or a classic. So depending on your personal budget or preferences, yeah, you might go one way or the other, or you might be very lucky and be able to get both, or at least handle both here. So another big shout out to the team over at Belmont Watches for having me. Let me know down in the comments below which would be your choice of the two. Any stories you guys have, or anything in terms of whether you were pursuing a Capt Willard, or maybe you got one of their SPB models. Hey, maybe you're trying to look forward to a possible 6105 8000 reissue in the future. Make sure to comment, and I'd love to talk shop with you guys. So if you liked the video, please do it like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks guys.